Good morning and welcome to the latest in City Magazine's series of free to attend webinars. I'm John Thornton, editor of City, and your host for today's session, which is sponsored by micro-mobility company Wind Mobility. Today's webinar is titled E-Scooters, the challenges and opportunities of a new mobility mode. Now, having lagged behind many parts of the world for years, the UK is now embracing motorised scooters as a potential urban mobility solution via year-long trial schemes taking place in major towns and cities across the country. Fast-tracked by the Department for Transport to support a green restart of local transport and help mitigate reduced public transport capacity, e-scooters offer the potential for convenient, clean, and affordable travel that not only enables social distancing, but also helps to reduce journeys made by car to ease congestion and lower emissions. Nottingham City Council is one of a number of local authorities to have recently announced an e-scooter trial, working with Wind Mobility to offer a new alternative choice for green travel in the East Midlands city. With more than 200 e-scooters currently available to hire, Wind and Nottingham will play major roles in helping policymakers decide the long-term fate of the technology. Now, providing insight into this topic today is Eric Wang, co-founder and CEO of Wind Mobility, and Rosita Chudasama, principal transport planner at Nottingham City Council. Together, they will discuss their UK trial scheme experience so far and examine the challenges and opportunities of this new mobility mode, as well as consider the potential long-term impact of e-scooter legalization on urban transport, both locally and nationally. By attending this webinar, viewers will learn how modern technology can mitigate risks and increase safety. You'll also learn about the key learnings from the Nottingham trial so far, and whether e-scooters will become a permanent implementation. Before we begin, I'd like to encourage viewers to ask questions throughout the presentation via the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. I'll pose as many of these questions as possible to Eric and Rosita in the time available following the presentation. Also, a recording of this webinar will be available to view on demand from tomorrow afternoon via www.citymagazine.co.uk. And with that, I'll now hand over to Eric Wang, co-founder and CEO of Wind Mobility, to start the presentation section of this webinar.
Great. Thanks, John. Very much happy to be here. And thanks to everyone for joining this webinar. And you guys can see my screen okay, right? All right. So I'm also here with my colleague, Lukasz. Lukasz is our city manager from Nottingham. And if there's any specific questions about Nottingham, right, that we might defer to Lukasz as well to help answer. So in this presentation, I'll just quickly introduce Wind's company, product, as well as a brief introduce the Nottingham trial, and then we'll pass on to Rosita to share from the City Council perspective. First, why Wind? Why we have started this business? Actually, about 10 years ago, when I was still a university student, I wasn't studying or related to mobility at that time, but I saw one day a 100-kilometer traffic jam on TV, and I was shell-shocked, right? And I thought this is definitely not sustainable, and there gotta be a better way, right? And I was close to completing my master program at that time in Germany, but I decided to change my master thesis completely, right? To write about the potential of vehicle sharing to promote more sustainable mobility development. And afterwards, I bought a one-way ticket and put all my saving to start a mobility startup to do just that. Now, a decade later, I founded two more companies in the mobility space, and Wind is operating across 30 different cities in Europe, Israel, and Korea, and providing millions of urban residents a crucial last mile transport option we focus on micromobility sharing of e-scooters and e-bikes. So what are some of the most pressing issues that we want to help solve? Like first is air quality, second, congestion, and three, social distance, especially during the pandemic. But how do we do that? Right, there's a couple components. One is we focus on custom-made scooters. Two, we focus on technology and operations. And three, always safety first, right? Fourth, right, we want to be sustainable and be socially responsible to our community. I'll briefly go into each to help explain. First, in terms of safety from a scooter, right? I think we have one of the most robust and durable scooter in the market, and which we customly built. And usually the feedback from customers are it's quite wide and bigger and stable. And it's not like if you run through a pothole, you might get thrown out. So it's it has a good suspension, it has a good tire shock absorption, and we also added a built-in helmet, right? So this way you can unlock the helmet through the app, right? And be able to ride it safely during the trip. And also reflective coating so that in the evening and night, right, you can still be seen by cars. And we also, during the pandemic, built in a hand sanitizer into the scooter. So so we want to keep you safe, while you travel. And others innovation, including a two double kickstand, right? That's not easy for the scooter to fall on the sidewalk. It has a wider anti-slippery platform, wider platform for the user to stand, and as well as all the screws inside the scooters are custom screws, and you need to use custom bit to open it, as well as many technology sensors such as detecting when the scooter goes get into accident, and then so to then pin our operation team to help notify the police and etc., as well as to monitor certain illegal scooter behaviors. And in terms of the battery of the scooter is 2 times as big as a normal industry standard, right? Which can go up to 50 miles in one charge. And so all these are the innovation that we put forward, right, to help build a safety scooter. Second, besides scooter, we want to educate the users, right, about responsible driving behavior, right? So first, when a user sign up, they need to take a rider test, as well as help go through some of the training event that we organize in the city across. And we also build a AI-based 3D secure driver license verification, right? Where you need to submit, both not just your driver license, but also take a selfie in order to verify that you are actually the driver of the scooter. And furthermore, we have a partner with a disability organization, for instance, to help ensure that these other affected part stakeholder are also being taken into account. We have a patroller in many of the city that we operate, and to constantly educate the user, provide driving school, and to ensure a safety riding experience. Third, we are sustainable and socially responsible for our community. We repair and reuse and recycle all of our scooter. So first, the scooter is custom built. It's very robust. It can be lasting 5 to 6 years. In addition, we recycle all of our scooters. For instance, we donate our bikes and scooter to Red Cross, as well as to Bike E, which is a refugee program in Greece and Germany. And we also provide electric bikes and electric vehicles in terms of operation to make sure they are the low carbon and then zero carbon emission. In addition, if there are any also additional carbon emission from us as a company, we offset them, right, with a climate neutral to, we're currently certified to be carbon neutral as a company. Furthermore, we also launched a Helping Hand initiative where we spend over $150,000 right across the city that we operate to support the key healthcare workers, right, to place a scooter in front of the hospital to help them, get home or to work for free. And this is a small support from our side that we feel to show appreciation to those frontline workers. So overall, we want to partner with the local organization to be sustainable in our operation and be responsible to our community. Uh, Furthermore, in addition to the cities that we currently operate, we currently have over 6,000 scooters in 7 cities across Greater Tel Aviv area. And we are also the sole partner, right, within France in Perpignan and La Baccaris. And in Italy, we currently operate in more than 7+ cities where we're either the one of the 2 or one of the 3 operators. In Nordic, we have over 3,000 scooters in Oslo and then and Reykjavik in Iceland. As well, we just began the trial in Bergen in Norway. And in Korea, we also are working with a city in Seoul and Busan. And next, I'll briefly discuss about our partnership with the UK. But before we do that, just quick, we're very fortunate to be partnered with those cities and, and to support some of these city council members. For instance, we work closely with the deputy mayor of Tel Aviv and as well as the city councils in Perpignan. To both adapt to the scooter usage and to iterate. And scooter has only been around as a shared mobility option for the last 2 to 3 years. And it's still a quite new industry. And we're working together with the city, right, to implement many of the measures such as parking spots, such as to ensure the scooter is running during the pandemic, during the lockdown, to provide a last transportation option. So we want to continue to do so and iterate with the city and all the city that we currently operate. Next, we'll just briefly discuss what our partners say about us. Since we have launched, we have gotten a good reception from the user. For instance, a student at Trent University Nottingham is saying, leading the way in terms of green travel. Other users are mentioning about, our scooter is bigger, is safer, it's make them feel better than riding other scooters. And other University of Nottingham student also give us kudos to leading the way in terms of green road, down the green road. And further feedbacks are, regarding to Nottingham users are commuting regularly, right, through using our scooters, a big fan, as well as the scooter drives well, very stable, right? So so far we've been quite happy with some of the initial response from those users. In terms of our trial in Nottingham, right, we won a competitive tender to participate in this e-scooter trial organized by Nottingham and Derby, right? So in Nottingham, we started with about less than 100 scooters, and now currently have around 250 scooters operating on the street. There are about 4 key aims, right, for this trial, right? First, we want to complement the city's transport network. Second, want to enable safe travels, especially while the social distance measure in place during the current pandemic. And 3, provide an alternative to fossil fuel powered vehicles. And 4, to help learn about the new mobility solution together, partnering with the city. In the 40 days since we started, right, and we have seen a quite positive reception so far. As I said, we started with 100 scooter, less than 100 scooter, only ramped up to 150 scooter in the last 2 weeks. And we have already seen over 10,000 users who use a scooter in Nottingham. It's equivalent to about 3.5% of the population already in Nottingham to use this in those 40 days. And each of them take about 3 to 4 rides since then, and which is equivalent to about 7 rides per scooter per day. At any given day, 90% of the scooter on the street are being used, right? And which is equivalent to around 20% of the time, the scooter is in use between 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Some other stats from these trials so far are, over close to 120,000 miles has been traveled, average close to 2 miles per trip, and over 17,000 hours and 30 minutes average riding time per trip. And we're also just about to roll out our long-term rental program in Nottingham and Derby, where 150 key workers already expressed interest to, and then they also will start delivering this program this week. But as any new introduction, right, there are some challenges, right, we are working on, and due to the high demand, right, as I said, each scooter is used 7 times at a 30 minutes trip each. That's equivalent to 3.5 hours of usage per day, right? So initially we are seeing that the battery level was many users find that the scooter has a low battery because there's such intense usage, right? We have increased our battery swapping frequency as well as the capacity to try to balance the supply and demand. And in addition, we're also working with the Nottingham Council to educate customers to not to ride on the sidewalk, as well as to patrol the street and implement markings, right, for on the street, so better for the user to better identify those parking spots. Lastly, I just want to share one more slide in terms of our data. Right here is a scooter usage on by hours and by day each day of the week. So normally what we see is two humps, right, with a morning commute, right, and an evening commute, with the morning be slightly smaller than the evening. But because of lockdown, the pandemic in Nottingham, right, we have only see a big afternoon hump in terms of the usage. But if you look at this, the weekday usage is actually higher than the weekend usage, right? So so from the survey that we've done to our users, so we also know that about 25% of the time people use it for commute, 20% of the time people use it for running errands, and 20% of the time used for visiting family and friends, right? And only less than 20% of the time is used for leisure activities, right? So I think that's a good indication of the scooter to usage, right? Some people might suspect scooter is mostly used for fun or for leisure, but in our case, we see more than 80% of the case that are time are used for commute and other other purposes. So we're quite fortunate, right, to seeing these positive initial data from Nottingham, and we would like to pass the floor to Risita to just briefly share his perspective from the City Council.
Thank you, Eric. Good morning, everybody. I'm just going to put my slides up. So I hope you can see that okay. So just to introduce myself, I'm Rosita Chudasama. As John has mentioned, I'm a principal transport planner here at Nottingham City Council, but I'm actually the project lead and also the client for the e-scooter trial. And in my broader role, I'm also the Future Transport Programme lead. So Nottingham and Derby collectively have won just under £17 million of funding, and that funding is all about trialling new mobility solutions over the next 4 years. So scooters was something that we were interested in incorporating as part of that programme. And the fact that the government have fast-tracked the legalisation of scooter trials was interesting for us. So we're participating because it helps to aid our understanding of the benefit of scooters and how scooters sort of fit into the mix of the transport system. So, so our learning over the next year will help to shape what we may go on to do in the long term. So in terms of what I wanted to talk to you about today, I've just got 4 areas to share. A bit of a recap on the trial requirements that we specified at the time of doing our procurement, a little bit of insight at the local level, if you like, or from the council perspective in terms of progress, to share some of the feedback that we've been getting, both the good and the bad, to give more of a balanced perspective, and then some of the improvements that we're looking to bring in to help address some of those. So starting at the beginning then, we carried out our procurement over the summer. If you'll know anything about the DFT's process with this, they made the announcement to legalise the trials in local areas that wanted them. That announcement came in May. The responsibility was for local areas to carry out the procurement in order to seek an operator and then apply to the Department for Transport to actually legalise that operation. So it's been quite a grueling, rigorous process throughout the summer to get to this point. The City Council led the procurement on behalf of ourselves and also Derby City Council, and we were looking for a single operator to work across both the cities. We wanted like a sort of multiple, a higher offer. So we placed an emphasis actually on supporting key workers through a subscription model, where basically an individual can get given a scooter that's exclusively theirs for the period that they rent it for, which could be up to a year. But it was more of a long-term proposition because we really wanted to get scooters into the hands of people that needed them, but also to try to mitigate car trips at a time when our public transport network capacity is significantly reduced, obviously because of social distancing measures. Despite what the government is saying, they're also kind of hinting at, oh, well, it's all right for you to drive in your car. We didn't want to congest our whole network. So scooters actually performed a bit of a role there in terms of helping to get people to commute safely, but also in a sustainable mode. Obviously, with the key workers subscription model, we talked to quite a few operators prior to going out to procurement. It's not the standard fare in terms of what is offered. And so we recognised the fact that we needed to have a pay per minute option in order to make the whole operation viable. And with upwards of 50,000 university students here in Nottingham, we recognised the fact that they could be quite a significant part of the target market. So the second point is that we felt that geofencing capabilities was an essential aspect of the operation. It's by no means a solution that we're recognizing. It's more about a mitigation tool, and so we were able to put in a series of control measures that you wouldn't ordinarily be able to do, certainly not with any other type of mode. So no-go areas, we specified those with the operator. Where scooters basically will still not be legal, is where we don't allow cycles to be. The go slow areas where the speed is capped at a lower speed, and that's particularly where we've got like our pedestrian streets, or where we've got high pedestrian footfall and therefore likely conflicts with other road users. We wanted to make the parking areas mandatory, so we could try and manage the littering or perceived littering problems, so people wouldn't just leave them on every street corner. And then that transferred into the safety element. So this was a bit that was heavily weighted in our procurement, and we tried to look for a range of interventions that the operator could provide. We tried to give a series of principles in terms of training and look at features with the vehicle itself, what types of communication and education would be provided. But we really wanted operators to try and paint that picture based on their experiences from elsewhere. Some of the other things that we did was probably a little bit heavy-handed. I don't know if other councils have done this, but we asked to look at the terms and conditions. So we actually wanted to see the hire agreement that would be put in place by the operator with the customer. And just to kind of vet it, make sure there's nothing untoward in that, the operator was acting reasonably. Obviously, this is new to us, it's new to the UK. And so we kind of wanted to just make sure that we'd covered that off. And the other thing that we did was, whilst Eric has shown some really great examples and photos and talked about the vehicle feature, we physically wanted to see them. So as part of our procurement assessment, we had a vehicle demonstration day where we could actually have a go on the scooter and actually see the features in action, if you like, in person. So why did we select wind? They scored the highest in our procurement exercise that was structured both in terms of the cost to the to the customer, and also in terms of the quality aspects of our evaluation that picked up things like the geofencing and how well that works, and safety and other aspects. We really felt that the take-home service, where people can actually have a scooter and carry out door-to-door journeys from home to their place of work, was really strong in Wynn's tender. Obviously, the scooters, if you've seen them, the images, they're really bright and they're distinctive. We felt that they would differentiate between the non-legal private scooters that we're obviously seeing around. The integrated helmets option that Wind offered to us, I believe we're the first city to have an entire fleet that will be fitted with integrated helmets, was a real strong aspect as well, because our local councillors are really putting safety of riders at the top of all of this, and other road users for that matter. And then the rideability of the thing, it was my first time going on a scooter over the summer, as it might have been for many people. So what is the robustness like? How does it work with braking? How easy is it to use the app, and things like that? So we were able to test that, and felt that it met with our expectations, alongside the assessments that the Department for Transport have done on all the scooters. So where are we in terms of our journey, if you like? We awarded our contract in September, and then spent some time behind the scenes putting the plans in place ahead of the launch. And actually getting to launch, I would say, was quite a significant milestone. I've been really impressed with the Wind team. They've gone from a standing start to mobilize really quickly and efficiently, found a local warehouse, got all the scooters in, got them ready, recruited their team, worked with me and my counterparts at the council and in Derby to put in suggestions and measures and work through potential problems, and really been proactive to kind of be in a listening mode and adapt to our needs. And then loads of innovation as well, such as like the hand sanitizers that have been put onto every vehicle. Obviously, at a time with COVID, I thought that was a really neat little innovation. So yeah, all of that stuff happened in the background that most people wouldn't actually see, because it was just like, how quickly can you launch this service? But a hell of a lot of work went on to get us to that point, which just I thought needed to be acknowledged. So we launched on the 27th of October, actually quite a rainy day in the end. It was at a time, if anyone can recall, if Nottingham and Nottinghamshire, we were sort of being announced as a tier 2 in terms of our restrictions, and then suddenly it was, no, we're going into a tier 3, and then it was a national lockdown. So we had all of that sort of chaos and noise and uncertainty around the launch of our trial. So it was quite a interesting time, let's say. As Eric has mentioned so far, in terms of the usage, that's looking really encouraging for us. We started really small in terms of the numbers. We had quite a big team around in terms of supporting and servicing the scooters, and that was on the instruction of the Department for Transport, based on learning from the other trial areas, so we could kind of control and sort of contain any issues should they arise. And I suppose one of the success measures that I was using at the time was, let's stay out of the press. We don't want any negativity, and we certainly don't want any safety implications or accidents or incidents, anything like that. Really, we just want to introduce this slowly, build it up from there. Make sure that we've got the systems in place, and we're all talking to each other. We've got the right support around us through our community protection, the police, other stakeholders that were necessary. And so really pleased to say that the key worker scheme is also the next bit that's coming up soon. So we've got, as Eric has mentioned, we've got about 150 people that have signed up to that. So it'll be really interesting to see what type of scooter usage comes out of the long-term offer. So just moving into the feedback bit, I've tried to sort of mine all of the responses that I get through the council's Have Your Says, through councillor inquiries and emails, phone calls, social media. And this is kind of what it's looking like in summary form. It's, you know, it is mixed, to be perfectly honest. It seems to be a very popular mode with younger people, and that's mainly driven by what I perceive to be older people saying, "Oh, I've seen lots of these young kids that, you know, there's lots of young people using these scooters. What are you going to do about it?" And to be honest, in a way, I think what's wrong with that? I think that's a good thing if young people are embracing this. If it means that in 2 or 5 or in 10 years' time, these younger kids or younger people end up not owning a car, well, that kind of meets with some of our strategic aspirations for the city. You know, we want to try and create an inclusive city and one that isn't dominated by vehicles everywhere. So fulfilling a need and supporting a certain segment of society with an alternate mode is an interesting aspect to all of this. The operation, as I mentioned, is working really well. The responsiveness of wind, the adaptiveness, the level of innovation, and that's all going really well. However, there are some areas that we need to improve upon. The main thing is that we have virtual parking areas, and so therefore they're not physically marked. They don't have any physical infrastructure, and that is generating a significant amount of reports for abandoned scooters or scooters that are perceived to be parked badly. And in most cases, they aren't, but because the public or people walking past them don't understand that, it's sort of generating a lot of inquiries. That is something that we're looking to address. Pavement riding as well, we feel that this perhaps is underreported at the minute, but people are observing them but not necessarily getting in touch to say that they've seen that. And then some vandalism, the scooter availability itself, because of the fact that the scooters have been in such high demand, the team have had to replace the batteries on a more frequent basis. And unfortunately, some helmets have gone missing, and customer services have also received lots of calls, mainly because of the abandoned scooters aspect, which I'll come on to. So just to build on that, this is by no means seeking to offend anybody on the call. I'm trying to make light of quite a tricky or controversial scheme. There are serious issues, and I do recognise that. But I just felt that actually, you know, working on a project like this, it's actually been quite divisive in terms of the responses that we've got. It's triggered quite a lot of strong reactions from people out there that absolutely despise scooters for whatever reason, if they feel that they're not safe or they just plainly don't like them. But then on the other hand, it's actually there's people who really support them, and they come out and they say, and they tell us that it's a great thing, and you know, it's kind of the green model, and it's part of a sustainable network. We should be having more of them. But my job is complex because I have a set of stakeholders that I need to keep happy, and it's really hard to sort of find a middle ground sometimes. So, you know, obviously we're a political organisation. We have councillors. Some are more supportive than others. Some don't like cycles, so they don't like scooters. That's fine, but we need to work with that. There's enforcement concerns. Obviously, it's the police who, as the organisation, that can carry out enforcement activity. So, to some extent, we are in their hands in terms of what they can respond to. So that needs to be a piece of work that we do together. Disability groups, I would say definitely fearful, definitely have strong concerns, and those concerns need to be listened to if we're going to make this scheme a success for everyone. It's no good to just putting in scooters and it works for young people, and then you've got other people who've got visual impairments that are significantly restricted or fearful. That doesn't really sit right in terms of equality. We've got the end user as well. Obviously, they're having a very positive response. The 10,000 people that have used these scooters, we're not necessarily hearing from them at the moment because they're less likely to be the ones who are writing to us or posting on social media. And then to contrast with that, we've got more skeptical members of the public that, as I say, hate them. That's quite a strong word, but they don't like them, or they're sending me very strongly worded emails to that effect. And then we've got the private users in all of this, who are definitely, the usage is definitely increasing. We are seeing that, and it's something that there is a risk. It's a risk in all of the trial areas that it could undermine all of the trials that are happening, because there's this confusion over, well, which one is legal and where can you legally ride it and where can't you? And then people see scooters on a pavement and they immediately think it's whatever they think, it's the operator, therefore it shouldn't be allowed. So it's really hard to kind of unpick that. But it's definitely something that is growing in terms of importance, that we need to have some better communication and information out there for people to understand the differences. The other thing I wanted to point out is that this is a technology driven mode, and it's almost like if you're plugged into the matrix, you know what's going on. If you have the app, you know how to access this service, but the technology is only part of it, and there needs to be more of a human side, so people actually are taken along this journey with us. Because shared mobility as a concept, whilst it might make sense to us as transport planners, if you speak to the punter on the street, they wouldn't necessarily understand what that means. And whilst we've only got 250 scooters, it's not a lot, but it's still a significant number if you're not used to seeing them. And some of the feedback has been, oh, it's happened overnight. We've got all these scooters, they're everywhere. But people see a yellow scooter and they immediately think, oh, I need to ring somebody because that shouldn't be there, it's abandoned, somebody needs to come and collect it. They're not making the connection that actually, if I download the app, I can register for the service and I can take that scooter and go wherever, go and visit family, or go to the shop, or go home. So there's a bit of a disconnect around that, and I think a lot of this is because it's brand new and we're not used to it yet. And so some of the behaviors need to be learned around this. And that's why it's a trial, essentially. We kind of need to embark on this to understand what the pain points are, what are some of the issues that are emerging, how can we develop the systems and the processes to sort of address those. So to kind of wrap up then, speaking of improvements, these are just some of my ideas, and I suppose that I think there was a comment from Sarah in the chat about what we're doing about physically marking these. So we do recognise the fact that the virtual parking stations or parking areas don't go far enough in terms of communicating to the wider public the fact that these scooters can be there. And so what we want to move to is physically marking them out. This is like a stencil example that our highways design team and road safety team have developed, that we can go out and actually spray up these parking areas. Whether we then need to have more physical sort of docking stations is something that we'll keep under consistent review. We couldn't do this at the time of launching the trial, I suppose, because of time pressures, and because this is new for us, we didn't necessarily know which areas would be popular, where the demand would come from. So now we've had a bit of time, and this is true of all of the trial areas. So this is something that we're kind of learning as we go with this. Partly with the way the DFT have structured it, and that we needed trials to start between July and October in order to carry out a procurement, select an operator, do all the vetting, work through some of the basics, get the scooters out. That's a hell of a lot of work to do in a very short amount of time. The other aspect is that we can't rely on common sense of the actual users. So people do, they look at the app and they think, okay, well, I want to come and park my scooter here. They see on the app there's a 15-meter radius within which they can leave it. And so people are physically plonking them right in the middle of the footpath and not actually applying their own common sense to think, well, what's around me? Is there a tree or a railing or a bench or a bin? Can I put it, like to the side as opposed to right in the middle? So there's again more education that's needed on this. What else do I want to say here? I think there's things around the incentives. So how can we encourage people to do the right thing? But we also need to follow up with some sticks as well, and have graduated penalties or suspensions on accounts and that kind of thing, where we really lean on the operator to try and work with us on that in terms of tackling bad behavior. and more engagement with non-users as well. I think hopefully I'm trying to convey that not everyone understands what scooters are about and how to access the service and who it's for. So bringing other people along with us, as well as our key stakeholders such as disability groups, representatives at universities, workplaces, etc. I think this is something where we need to kind of expand our horizons, and the council has a role in all of this. We can't just leave it to the operator to go and launch a trial and talk to whoever they want to. We need to understand the conversation and some of the pain points and the issues that are occurring. And education, it seems a bit of a, not an oversight as such, but again, it's an emerging theme, I think, for cycling, for instance. If you draw some parallels, there's lots of standards for cycling. It's pretty standard in terms of offering doctor bike and maintenance services, cycle training, etc. So are there things that we can learn through that and apply it to scooters, especially if we want them to be ridden on the road, and for riders of scooters to feel safe on the roads and on cycle lanes and in other areas. And then again, with my transport planner hat on, I'm really interested in understanding on a deeper level who these people are in terms of who's using them, where they're going, what they would have done if they hadn't had a scooter. So would they have done a car trip? Would they have not made that journey at all? I think that's really interesting evidence for us to build upon as we move forward in the long term. So that was a bit of a whistle stop. Hopefully it's interesting for people. I think we're moving on to questions now, so I'll stop there.
Rosita, Eric, that was brilliant. Thank you very much for a very fascinating presentation, which leads us nicely into the Q&A section of the webinar. And I'm pleased to say that we do have a few questions for you both. Our first question comes from Sarah Gayton, who is the Shared Space Coordinator at the National Federation of the Blind. And Sarah asks why you opted for a dockless model of e-scooter when there are safety and accessibility problems for blind and partially sighted people, elderly people. Why did you opt for that model of operation? And who would like to go first on that, Rosita?
Yeah, sure. I can say part of it. Well, we wanted a flexible solution because it's an entirely new mode. We didn't know how it would go down. We're treating scooters very much as cycles. So scooters can go where cycles can go. We expect scooters to be parked up the way cycles are. You see cycles on the footpath and in pavements in everywhere. And so that's basically the logic behind it. However, obviously, the situation that we've got at the moment with only virtual parking areas, it's not going far enough. And so we do acknowledge that. We've got a plan in place to try and resolve that. And so hopefully we can provide more order and more structure in the coming weeks in terms of indications of where scooters can be left and not.
Maybe I would just add on to this that in our experience, I think the Nottingham, we did it. I would say, in many other cities, right? Some cities are hybrid, some cities are completely dockless, and some cities are, I would say have parking area. Like I think in Nottingham, I wouldn't call it completely dockless because we have to park the scooter in the virtual parking spot. Right, there are over 400 parking spots. Although we are, as I see the saying, we're starting to mark these parking spots. So, so to a certain extent, this is almost the same as, in concept, a docked docked station, right? Because in other cities we have seen some where the city center is an all parking spot. Right, and then the outer peripheral area is more free flowing, right? But I think in this instance, the 400 parking spot is quite significant. It's we can think of them as a docked mode instead of a dockless mode.
Thank you, guys. Our next question, well, it's two questions in one, really. We had a couple of people asking about the helmets and how, firstly, they commend you on including the helmets on the scooters, but how are you ensuring that that the helmets not only fit different head sizes, but how are you sanitizing them and ensuring that they are hygienic for all users?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. So first, the helmet is adjustable. So inside you can adjust the size, right? So we try to make it, as widely adaptable as possible. And second is the helmet itself is, the material is a non-sticky material. So like any, let's say water or like spice, it shouldn't have stayed there like, like a normal helmet where it just stuck. And three, we have a hand sanitizers, right? That a user can use if they want to wipe the helmet. Four is the helmet are also certified, right? So these are like gone through the as rigorous testing as a scooter to be allowed into the European Union and into the UK. So there's no instance that we've seen the helmet is put in that it would fall off the scooter, right? And there are locked onto the helmet, right, from the scooter. So and that is quite rigorous. Although I would say the one challenge that we do see, is some people still take the helmet, right? And they're a good helmet, right? So and so we've been replacing some of these helmet, right, on the scooter. But I think it's more better education. Some user maybe just not locking it like really well, and another user maybe just took it, right? So we are iterating on that, improving the experience. But overall, we're providing all the fleet, right? With our goal is to provide all the fleet with a helmet, and if there are helmet lost, then we'll try to replace them if possible.
Mhm. Thanks. I actually had a bit of a follow-up to that myself. Currently, helmets are optional, but do you believe that they should become a compulsory requirement whilst riding an e-scooter, purely for safety purposes?
Personally, I think they should, people should wear the helmet, right? And they can use our helmet or they can bring their helmet, right? In many of the geo that we see, people bring their own helmet, right? Because just it's their preference, right? So, but I think safety first, right? So, but the scooter doesn't go as fast. It's a similar or even slower than bike to a certain extent. So, but I think we would recommend people use a helmet. And we've seen in some geo where the helmet is mandatory, and some geo is more highly recommended, right? But we try to aim for all our fleet to by end of this year or beginning of next year to have equipped with helmet, right? So that there should be always optionality available for them.
Sure, thank you. Our next question comes from Richard Wintrip from Bournemouth University. He asks, are there any concerns relating to users switching from more active travel modes to e-scooters? And what percentage of users have swapped e-scooter trips for single occupancy car journeys? Who'd like to respond to that one?
Yeah, I don't mind coming in. I think, Richard, that's a great question, and that's exactly what we want to try and understand. I think at the minute it's too early for us to be able to tell who's switching from where. I've just answered another question from Eric, actually. I think my perception is, or my knowledge working in transport is that you kind of need all the what we want to try and achieve is choice. So we're pro-choice in having alternates, whether it's walking, cycling, scooters, electric vehicles, obviously public transport come into the mix, as well as clean vehicles in terms of for the people that actually do still need to commute by car. And I suppose what I'm trying to the point I'm trying to make is that I think people who would take to cycling do it because they love cycling. I'm a cyclist. I used to when I used to go to work. I used to cycle to work every single day, come rain or shine. they may not be the target market though, that we don't want to switch people out of active mode into using scooters, but we do want to try and attract people that are commuting by car into maybe what is perceived as a less of an active mode, into scooters, but at least they're moving in the right direction. It's sort of similar to people who won't travel on the bus will travel on the tram. So can we get a different segment within society to use these scooters? And I don't know if Eric can elaborate on that in terms of experience from other trial areas that are a bit more established than ours. But yeah, it's something that we're very receptive to try and understand a bit more about.
Fantastic.
I think that's a great question. I think I completely agree with Rosita. So having more choice, it's giving the commuter or the resident more choice is definitely a good approach, right? And we have seen some of these other geos where, for instance, in Tel Aviv, right, the public transportation is not, let's say, as well developed, right? There's only bus, there's no like tram, there's no subway, and the scooter have become really fills the gap, and because the traffic is so bad, and if you take a taxi, it's super expensive as well, right? And then the scooter really help fill that gap, right, to in the short distance city commute and city trips, right? Both shared scooter and private scooter, right? And in addition, there are some restrictions in some of these cities where for instance, on Shabbat, right, in Tel Aviv, right, the public transport are not running, right? So, and then the scooter become the only available choice, right, unless you take cars, right? So, and it's also during the lockdown and then during the pandemic, where none of the other servers were operating, but scooter was available, and then those key worker can use it. So, I think in our view, scooter help enlarge the pool, right? And to help, maybe substitute a little bit that car trip, substitute a little bit the taxi trip, right? And then maybe it will also like complement with public transportation. But at this time during the pandemic, maybe people are more prefer to go on these open air, socially distanced way of travel than to be in a public transport, right, with close with others, right? And but that might be just a temporary effect, right, due to the pandemic. We're also doing more surveys and more study, but I would say overall, right, that by the trips that we've seen, like commute, right, and to visit, to run errand, right, and then to visit family and friends, and these are trips people take, via cars or via other modes as well. So I think giving that optionality, especially we know that under the basic 2-mile intercity trips are there's quite a lot of pain point, right? Because bus is not point to point, taxi is very expensive and it's stuck in traffic, driving on your own, have to find parking, and it's all the difficult. Scooter really help fill that gap. And it's not necessarily just all replacing walking or all replacing bicycle trips, right? Because there are different needs. Like for instance, if I'm in the city, and if I need to get a meeting quickly, right, and a scooter can be a great way, right? Whereas if I bicycle, ride my own bike, I lock it, I get a little bit sweaty, and I go to the meeting, I need to calm down a little bit, right? That reduced the let's say the frequency that I can take that bike trip, right? Where for instance, scooter can help fill that. So I think our overall view is this: increasing the choices, increasing the pie can help provide a more more transport options, right, for the resident.
Great, thank you, Eric.
Mhm.
Our next question comes from Matt Cottam, who asks, I think Rosita is probably directed at you. What advice could you give to other local authorities currently considering trials beyond working on some of the issues that you've mentioned?
Sorry, can you say that again, John? I didn't hear all of it.
No problem. So Matt Cottam asks, what advice could you give to other authorities currently considering trials beyond working on some of the issues that you've mentioned in your presentation?
I think, well, do the procurement as well as you can. Try and talk to other local authorities that have done the procurement. I'm happy to share the documentation that we used. Obviously, as I mentioned at the start in my presentation, that we specified it more around the long-term option, so that may not be relevant. But take some time to try and understand the scooter market, understand the technology. There's lots of acronyms and jargon, like geofencing and things like that. Really try to understand as much as you can about that, because this is kind of typical when it comes to local authorities. When we go to the market, you speak to anybody and they always say, oh yeah, we can do everything, but maybe they can, but they do some things less well. And so we sort of need to understand that, and we recognize that when we worked through this, that this is a partnership, that we need to work together and develop the improvements that we need to see in alongside wind, and not necessarily just compel the operator through a traditional sort of client contractor role. So it's having an acknowledgement of that you need to sort of resource it, and don't shy away from it. I think the fact that scooters have been invented, there are shops in pretty much up and down the country, in every city. People are buying them. They're buying them off the shelves, despite the police putting out press notices saying, don't buy a scooter for Christmas because it's not legal. It's happening. So we can either sit by and be in a passive state and see what happens and then formulate our response, or we can participate in it. With these scooters, what's so great about them is that you can introduce so many levels of control that you probably couldn't do in any other type of mode. The fact that you can specify where they can go, how fast they can go, who is riding it, where they've been. So if you need to suspend an account or levy some kind of charge, those are the things you can't do it with a private scooter. You can't do it with a cyclist that's cycling down the footpath. So I think it's a bit of a baptism of fire. You need a bit of rhinoceros hide because you're going to get you're going to get people that really feel strongly. I mean, even if you just look at the chat, sorry to single you out, Sarah, but Sarah's asking lots of very strong questions. You have to have a response for those things, but you need to talk to these stakeholders. You can't just hide away from them. So it's a shared effort. And I suppose it's just recognizing that the fact that therefore, as an authority, you need to prioritize your efforts in this, and so if you want to do it, be prepared to to have a point person, somebody who's going to help to champion this. Otherwise it will just descend into chaos. That's the risk anyway.
Thanks, Rosita. I'm a little bit conscious of time. We do have a few minutes remaining, and we do have a lot more questions. So I'll just try and get through as many as I can, as briefly as we can. Ross Rollins asks, have you assessed routes in Nottingham to determine particular roads that are not appropriate or perceived to be unsafe for e-scooters? Main A roads or particularly busy roads in the city.
Yeah, sort of. So we first of all, we allow scooters to go to the full extent of the city's boundary, which is partly why we thought that geofencing was necessary or essential, because we need to be able to contain the scooters within the city's boundaries. Nottinghamshire aren't participating. So at the moment, there's like pretty much freedom for riders to choose where they go. There is advice in the app in terms of what is sensible, but then we're fortunate in that we have and we are also developing through the Transforming Cities Fund our cycling routes, and particularly our off-road network, so people can use those. Our role is to continue to push out where those are, so people know that they can make those connections and use them.
Brilliant, thank you. I have another question here that asks, are there any plans to increase the size of the fleet in Nottingham, given that the uptake's been so positive?
Yes. yeah, we do want to increase the size of them. We're still taking it slowly. We need to get the physical the parking spots physically marked out. I think that would really help towards giving some structure and order around how the trial is operating. People can make the visual cue that, oh, actually, okay, this is where scooters belong because they're physically marked out on the ground. And then we can start building on the size of the fleet. We've got the key worker element that's coming in as well, and this is people that have volunteered. You know, they're the ones that have they've expressed an interest and they've asked to have a scooter. So I'm really interested in talking to those people. We've got a real mix. We've got nurses, care workers. We've got people who work in the police. We've got cleaners. So why are they interested in having a scooter, and kind of get some positive feedback as well, because I think at the moment people who like them, as I mentioned, they don't necessarily shout about it, whereas people that dislike them, we hear from them very strongly.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rosita. That actually brings us to the end of the Q&A section. We did have a few more that we haven't had time to get round to, but fear not, we will be able to provide questions to both Rosita and Eric. So if you have asked them in the Q&A box, we will be able to send those over to both Eric and Rosita, and they'll be able to get back in touch should they wish to answer those. I'd just like to thank both Eric and Rosita for joining us this morning. I'd also like to thank Wind Mobility once again for sponsoring today's webinar, which will be available to view on demand from tomorrow afternoon via citymagazine.co.uk. Just in case you'd like to refer back to the presentation, we've had a couple of people in the Q&A box ask about slides. So if you would like to refer back to the presentation, that will be available to view on demand. You can also share it with your colleagues. And that's it. Thank you all for attending today's webinar. I thought it was brilliant, really fascinating insight into just one of the trials that are happening in the UK right now. I'll be very interested to see how not only Nottingham progresses, but all the trials happening in the UK over the next year or so. And we will continue to bring you lots of micro-mobility and e-scooter news via citymagazine.co.uk. That's it. I'm John Thornton, and I will see you again soon. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thanks.